more measures, which won't satisfy you, John. I don't disagree with the size of the problem, but I don't think there is the electoral appetite yet to make the really big changes that are needed. And if you wanted the really big changes, I think you would be telling people they can't fly anymore. And I don't think the public's ready to accept that. So what do? We look for putting money into green technologies. I accept that this does make electricity more expensive in the short term, but it's the long way to go. We work on making sure that houses are built to the highest standards. And one of the things about the programme I was mentioning earlier on, to build lots of houses, they have to be to the right standards. Those are the main things that we will do. It's a question of nudging. It's persuading people, if not to be totally vegetarian, then at least to eat less meat. And I think that that is the way to go. Because I think that the Green Party is putting forward its programme. I think that if we went entirely for a low carbon economy with all bells and whistles, it wouldn't be acceptable. So we are aiming for a lower carbon economy. We are taking the various steps, we are enshrining the targets in law. But I think for I don't think that that's going to really satisfy, is it, John? No. So there we are.
The Paris conference at the end of this year is probably the most important international conference that many of us will have in our lifetimes. Because the 2 degrees, I mean, this is the tipping point. In 2 degrees, we're almost there now. We can't stop it. So that conference for once, and I'm an internationalist, I'm not a globalist. I think globalisation is a disaster because of the economic model that comes with it. But we've got to be capable at that conference of getting some level of international agreement to take the measures we need to do to decarbonise all our energy and many of our other means by which we've grown used to. And as a vegetarian, I see nothing wrong with food measures being brought in which encourage different forms of production which are much more sustainable than we've got at the moment, and which encourage people to change their diets and to change the way they live. Yeah, it's got to be encouragement. You can't hit people over the head all the time. But the reality is that we've talked a lot, and Sarah's talked a lot about, and Sue's talked a lot about generation now. I mean, we owe it to our children, and particularly our grandchildren. If we don't make this change now, all other politics is irrelevant. So you're right, John. I mean, it is the issue of our time. The trouble is, it does go down the agenda because too often people live just for today. But I do think that there's a yearning amongst younger people in particular to recognise that they want a world to inhabit, not what we're going to leave with.
I discussed this with John from time to time at Council. On the precautionary principle alone, I think it's right that we should evolve to a low-carbon economy, but that's got to include nuclear power. James Lovelock, the creator of Gaia theory and one of the prime motivators in the green movement in the early days, says you can't call yourself a green unless you support nuclear power. I think we've got to accept that our electricity is going to be more expensive in whatever way we make it. If it's low carbon, nuclear has got to form part of that. It's the only way we can produce the volume of electricity that we need, despite all the conservation measures that we'll make and making sure our houses are warm. It's the only way that we can actually have a genuine, sustainable, reliable form of power going forward.
Okay, well, John and I are probably not going to be friends over this issue. In the last 18 years, there's been no statistically significant warming in the atmosphere.
Oh, rubbish.
Okay, I think we need to hear the views of the panellists.
Do you ever fly? Do you ever fly? What? Do you ever fly?
I think we're asking the panellists the questions run the other way.
Right. Green energy.
Please, can we listen together, please?
We've only just seen and highlighted in the local papers just how much profit is made by green energy companies. when you consider that wind turbines, the landowners have, they get paid £1,000 an acre to house solar panels. £1,000 an acre. So when John says there's not as much food produced, well, you only have to see the A38 in Barclay. No food can be produced because of the solar panels up there. So how are you going to produce food then?
Okay.
Sheep have never gone under solar panels. I have never seen one sheep. If you knew anything about agriculture and rural affairs, as David knows, he will know that sheep do not graze under solar panels.
Well, that's what they're going to do.
Okay. Thank you, Caroline. I think your 2 minutes is up. So let us move on to Sarah, please. And let's give some space to the panellists to speak.
I think UKIP's use of statistics has been very, very interesting this evening. I think next time Caroline comes to Hustings like this, she actually needs to bring on some kind of evidence base for the figures she's putting forward, because I think...
likewise.
Okay, please.
Because many of them have been absolutely wrong. 97% of the world's scientists agree that climate change is happening. They're 99% sure. That's scientific speak for it absolutely is going to happen. When it says there's a 50% chance of rain, you know what I do? I take my coat out with me. When it says there's a 99% chance of rain, I also take my umbrella, because you know it's going to happen. Adrian demonstrates the full extent of the problem that we face, however. He recognises that climate change is happening, but can't actually put forward any reasonable way of tackling it. And David is pretty much the same. I think he does genuinely accept that climate change is happening and would like to see a real change. But actually, nobody seems to know what to do about it. There is one thing we absolutely do need to do. We have to leave the fossil fuels in the ground. There is no other option on that. We can aim for a 2% degree change in terms of the warming of the climate. The only way we can do that is if we stop burning fossil fuels. And that's the starting point we have to take. Maybe we do need to look at nuclear, but it will take 15 years before we can get new nuclear capacity, if we're lucky, coming online. We need to do something now. We need a Marshall Plan for the environment, and it's not just the environment, it's also what we were talking about earlier. It's about the economy. We have to link the two together. If our environment changes, it will be a catastrophe for our economy. The world will carry on. It will still be here. There will still be life on this planet, but it will be very, very different. And how many of us actually will have meaningful lives in the future is something which, well, yeah, it's something that I don't really want to contend with, which is why I've joined the Green Party. So what we need is government action,
Briefly, no.
not individual action, but there is one individual action that everyone in this room can make on May the 7th, and that is you can vote Green.
Thank you.
To do with this, I think that climate change, our attitude towards it, requires complete global cooperation. But where does it begin? It begins one person at a time. You change your habits, and you ask the next person to change their habits, and show them by example how they can do that. We can agree locally and nationally and internationally certain procedures to follow, that we look at green alternative energies. We just sell our carbon footprint to a country that you know can't argue with us. So we all continue living as we want to live, going on 4 holidays a year. Didn't all the people who attended the G20 summit fly in Learjets? I seem to remember. Yeah. So, you know, one person at a time, but complete global cooperation is required. Thank you.
I actually think it doesn't matter whether climate change is happening or not. I would like to see a world in which there's less pollution, fewer wasted resources, and a more sensible way of living. And I think, I mean, I personally do believe that climate change is happening. I lived in Germany for many years, and I saw how green policies were introduced, and I also saw that in the wake of increasing financial pressures, though many of those policies were reversed. But one thing that Germany has stuck to is that they're getting rid of atomic power. By 2025, 50% of its energy will be provided through renewables, and they have the target of 85 by 2050. Now, I know it's Europe, maybe that's one reason for discrediting that statistic, but it's actually proved that even under a capitalist economy, renewable energy is an option, and I think it's certainly a good option. Even sheep and cows graze on wind farms and solar plants. I've seen it myself, and I certainly wouldn't want to eat food grown near the motorway with all the pollution that causes. So I think we all recognise that resources are finite and that we should look after our planet better than we have done. In my opinion, the main problem in that regard is the profit interest. Profit motive stops all of these things. Profit motive stopped research into solar and wind energy for decades. Lots of patents were bought up by energy companies. So one of the things that I would say is we need to renationalise energy. We have to have it properly controlled, democratically controlled and run. We need a nationalised transport system, a nationalised rail system, and then we can use those resources